All right, have fun, Matt.
All right, time for my jokes. Joerg, thanks for joining me. We talked last night at an 8200 event, and it was a great conversation. So let's do it again.
Okay.
So you've been in the auto industry for how long?
22 years.
So I think you've worked both in Germany and in Michigan.
In Canada, in Windsor, in Toronto.
Oh shit, everywhere,
Dallas.
Huh? Well, there's one thing that bothers me, and I'm really hoping you can clear this up. Why the hell do Americans not like station wagons?
That's a good question. Well, I think it's a very cool car. Even in the US, it has the coolest factor.
Yeah, I own
And I don't know it. It's our favorite car in Germany and in Europe, but not in the US. I don't know why, but there is the SUV.
I owned a Dodge Magnum for 10 years, and I'm just curious. Anyway,
yeah.
So you're the head of mobility services for Daimler. So
yeah.
That means that you work with the apps in the different ways other than station wagons, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So you work with a bunch of startups, and Daimler's portfolio is broad.
Yeah.
I would like to run through a couple of those services that you offer, and just give me a brief explanation about them. So we'll start with Car2Go.
Well, Car2Go we invented roughly 10 years ago in 2008. It's the biggest free-floating car-sharing service with 14,000 cars, 25 cities worldwide. And so we're the car-sharing pioneer, let me say that.
What about My Taxi?
My Taxi is, Dave doesn't want to hear it, but we think we're the largest European taxi hailing platform. Now in 13 countries. We bought that, we acquired it, and then we merged it with Halo, a competitor in the UK. So it's a taxi hailing platform. And we acquired some further stakes or companies that are attached to My Taxi on a global basis.
Well, Movil.
Yeah, Movil is our multimodal platform. Movil is the overarching idea that mobility in the future is a combination of multiple modes of transportation, not just one, but the combination of it all. And that is what we think customers will want in the future, but with public transportation at its core.
What about any other strategic investments?
Well, besides those three core businesses, we have various shareholdings in companies like Turo, Envia, Blacklane, Flixbus, the largest long-distance bus company in the world, in Europe, and some other smaller stakes. And just recently we announced a stake in Taxify, the fastest-growing taxi or ride-hailing platform in the world right now.
So explain to us what the overall thesis is for Daimler by acquiring or working with all these startups.
Yeah. Well, it's a mix. I want to correct you a little bit. It's not working with the startups. Like some we found, some we buy. So we have a mixed strategy of owning these companies, but also being a part of them. So your question goes to me to the core of what the auto industry is about in the future. It's the most fundamental shift that we foresee. It's really like we compare it when we challenged the horse carriage and introduced the car. 125 years ago.
Sure.
This is what we see in the future right now. This is what will happen to us as the auto manufacturers in the future. So we're working basically since 10 years on getting prepared for that. And what that means is that we clearly believe that ownership of vehicles will see a major disruption. I don't want to say it comes to an end. There might be an end somewhere in the future, but it will see a major disruption. Ownership of vehicle will be challenged. And that applies to all our segments. This applies to passenger cars, vans, trucks, buses. People want to use mobility as a service. This is a big buzzword, but in the end, do I want to get from A to B? I can do it with my own car that I own, or I use one of the multiple services that we heard all day.
Great. So when you say people want to use mobility as a service, right?
Yeah.
Where does that come into play regionally? Is it different across the globe? Is that why Daimler has all these different services, or are you focusing on one area?
First of all, I think this is happening on a worldwide basis. This is, there is a very large common denominator of that shift. The specifics are different per region. And that's what we see when you look at all the different ride-hailing and mobility companies worldwide. They are slightly different per region. There is a different approach in China, in the US, in Europe, in South America, Africa. So it's always slightly different, and we see that with the competitors. They also don't have one approach worldwide. So we see it also as a regional approach. We start in Europe as our strong foothold, And we have a very strong presence there with a strong expansion into North America.
I'm asking these questions because Tel Aviv in Israel is full of mobility startups that I'm sure a good chunk would love to work with Daimler. So what's the ideal company or founder, or what does that look like?
Well, I think it's, for us, it's important that we see ourselves as a strategic partner here that helps us transform our company, Daimler, into a provider of mobility services in the future. So this is, we go through major transformation shift as a OEM. And for that, we need these companies to support that transformation, to get into technologies, services that are sometimes hard to develop in-house, but have a good attachment to it, own it, or take a stake in it, to really help the transition. So for us, everything related, basically, it's the full range, basically. It's personal mobility, it's freight mobility. Freight mobility always gets a little bit sort of sidetracked, but if you look at cities and their true challenges, they're looking with very big eyes towards all these package delivery services that are blocking the cities, so besides personal mobility. So we look at the whole range for trucks, buses, vans, and cars. And so everything in those areas is of very much interest to us, but also all the technologies, algorithms that lie behind that can improve the service of experience mobility, leveraging the time that you spend in the car more wisely. That is all of interest to us. We have our R&D center here in Tel Aviv, and this is where we want to connect to the local, companies here and understand and leverage and bring it to the company.
What about autonomous vehicles?
Yeah.
Where does that fit into your overall? Is that part of the mobility service, or does Daimler put that somewhere else?
Well, the development of the autonomous vehicle, let me call it the hardware, with all the attached services and software, this is part of the vehicle R&D team. And we have a joint setup between R&D and mobility services, where we're going to put that self-driving car in service through our services that we have, My Taxi Car to Go, Movil, and so on. Because what we believe is, there is the self-driving car is per se, but you have to embed it into a system, especially in the first phases. You want to make sure you control that and have a good influence on the whole experience that the customer experiences. But ultimately, our mobility services that we do are the foundation for the operation of these vehicles. We know that a car sharing, a ride-hailing service will fundamentally change when autonomous vehicles at level 4 and 5 are fully available.
Sure.
So it is our preparation for providing these services in the future.
Now, we talked last night quite a lot, and one thing really struck me and really hit home, that you guys are not a venture capital firm, so your risk assessment must be different. Daimler and Mercedes is used to being the best of everything, but some of these startups don't work out. How do you approach a startup by doing that? What do you tell the founder? What are the expectations?
Well, we of course look at the technology, the service, the idea that is there, and how it fits to our strategy and to our approach. And if we come to an agreement, hey, you want to join us, we are very clear and transparent with that founder, that team, what we jointly can do. And that doesn't mean we'll absorb that company fully into Daimler. We found over the years now, and that's where the experience comes in, and we made our mistakes. We make sure we keep the space, the freedom that those companies need alive. And a big part of our job is to protect these companies from being fully influenced by all the policies, all the procedures that, of course, a big corporation has like ours. So this is why keeping them outside, but still connected is a key part of the job here.
Great. So say I'm a mobility startup founder with some amazing tech. Sell me on Daimler over General Motors or Ford or even Uber.
Well, it starts with the story that we invented the car, and we will be also at the forefront of inventing that next phase of mobility. A core of Daimler is with the Mercedes brand at the top of it is that safety, security, innovation from the get-go. The long history of innovating safety features into the car, being at the leader of that for decades. We're now at the forefront also of working on that next phase. So what we, tell our tech companies and how we sell them that they stay with us, because that's we all know that's the real challenge, We work on the future of autonomous driving from the perspective of not just one element, but really from the overall system. The vehicle, the operations, the back end behind it, the user interface. So it's the whole story, and that is typically, where we have a unique position, because we're not starting just now. We're working on that for quite a while now.
Give these guys an inside track. What's the best way to pitch Daimler?
I think it's our local presence here. This is probably the best that you can do through our R&D center here, through the bridge that we talked yesterday about as well. So we have local presences in Silicon Valley, here in Tel Aviv, in China, in Germany, obviously. So get in contact through that, approach them. We're present at many conferences. We host our own, and then you get the connection, because the big challenge for a small startup is who are the right contact parties within the company to pitch your ideas. So we have these events and we invite, but the local locations are the best approach.
Great. I guess what I was asking is, what's your email address?
Adi has it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what had to change within Daimler to make this shift from being totally focused on cars to mobility services? And was there a change in yourself?
Well, for Daimler, I think it's a process. There's, now it seems also obvious. This is important. If I compare just today with 2 years ago, things we talk today about that are so obvious, 2 years ago they were not as obvious. Mm-hmm. So for a company like ours, and probably that applies to all other OEMs and to all other industrial companies, it's a process. It's a cultural change, it's a transformational change, and it requires convincing leadership at the top of the house that believe in it, that believe that we have to, like 10 years ago, invest in these businesses, acquire that company at a point where nobody believed in it, and give the freedom and the backing to work there, because you cannot apply the regular rules of procedures of a company, business cases, 5-year return, and this doesn't apply here. Sure. So we have to play according to the rules on the outside, and that's what we're doing. And I personally made the shift from the core business, mainly financial services, fleet management, into that. I did it twice. I did 15 years ago. I went to a startup without mobile. It was just web. Came back, and now I'm back in the tech and mobile space, mobility space. It's that kind of a shift that we have to do internally more often, even. That you come from both sides, but you have to be very open-minded and learn first.
Well, what about you personally? Because if you're coming from finance and you're a car guy and you did a startup, what brought you into mobility?
Well, it's typically those unusual situations and short-term opportunities, but I think I've always, it was clear that I like these things, and I was always into that, and then the opportunity came up, and you go in and you jump in and you do it, like some other colleagues do, like Adi does. She's now here in Israel from financial service, and that's this is the internal part, but then we need to bring in from the outside a lot more people. But it's that parallel transformation of the core business plus all these new businesses that we have to manage in a big corporation.
Do you think there's been a change in corporate world where a lot of R&D used to happen inside of companies? Are they offloading that to startups?
Well, we heard the discussion here about cybersecurity before, where it was mentioned that a big part is put on the back of the tier 1 suppliers, Same on IT development, right? We were basically managing external IT. I think what we deliver through our mobility services team is that we in-house all of that. That we prove that it makes sense to do it in-house, and you have to do it in-house. So there is a big shift right now towards internalizing that. But at the same time, you need to identify the spots and areas where you need to cooperate. Because this is more, I think, our challenge, that we think we should do all on our own, but we rather have to identify the right partners, the right experts on the outside, and cooperate with them properly.
So let's talk about the future here. Yesterday, Daimler unveiled some electric semi-truck or lorry truck, right? What else are you guys looking for in mobility services? If you were to start a mobility company right now and you wanted to sell to Daimler, what would that company look like?
I mean, you mentioned an electric truck. I mean, we summarize it under the 4 letters of CASE, C-A-S-E, which basically everybody does, but for us it's connected vehicles, it's autonomous driving, shared services and shared mobility, and electrification. These are the 4 big areas for all auto manufacturers, and we have dedicated focus behind all 4 areas. And the electrification of the drivetrain is a major one, with all its challenges to really replace combustion engines. On the shared side, this is sort of our responsibility to make sure we deliver on that shared service and that experience, and the connected piece is where our R&D teams works, and the autonomous part. So these 4 areas are this is how we combine that business under the letters of CASE.
What were they one more time? What were those 4 areas?
Connected, autonomous, shared, and electric.
You guys take that down? Those are the companies you should be building.
Yeah.
All right, great. So just to wrap things up here, when do you think autonomous, I mean, we're going to talk big picture here. When do you think autonomous vehicles will really hit the mainstream?
Well, that's the big question that I think mainstream, you know, personally, I think we will see, we see already autonomous vehicles on the roads. We will see more and more of these pilots, you know, where you can experience it, also with real-time customer experience and interaction. I think that to me, the next decade is the most interesting that we are facing, because we will see the full breadth of all the options. Non-autonomous, fully autonomous, electric, non-electric, all on the same roads, and that is probably the biggest challenge, and we will see how especially city react to that. So to me, the next decade is where we will see everything on the same roads, and
Sure.
After the next decade, I think that's when we see the big shift into, you know, a more focused transportation of full mobility, full autonomous, in dedicated areas. Yeah.
What do you think would have to happen in order for you to put your children in an autonomous car? How long? I mean,
I would put them in there now.
You would?
Yeah, and I would, you know, today there has to be a safety driver, so knock on wood, they are focused. But they would love to do it already, because that is to me the biggest, my biggest indicator. My kids, when I look at them, they're 13 and 15. In 10 years, they're customers, and they expect so different things from the markets, the services, and we have to supply to them.
Does Mercedes expect in 15 years for them to be a car buyer or a user?
In 15 years, it will be users. The large degrees will be users. That next generation, depending on where they live, I think that's always the side note. You know, if you live in a rural area, it's different. Detroit, outside, may be different. But if you live in a city, you will be a user, I'm convinced.
Well, great. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you 2 days in a row.
Yeah, thanks.
On your toes, buddy.
We'll go that way.